Hello, this is Sarah Brash. Welcome back to my channel. So I want to do a video today about this documentary that just started airing on HBO about cancel culture and trial by Twitter without due process. And it is a documentary that was made by by Monica Lewinsky, of course famous for her affair with Bill Clinton in the 90s and the subsequent, scandal. Um, and so it was also made by the director. His last name is Joseph, I believe, and I'm forgetting his first name, but his last name is Joseph, and Monica Lewinsky. So they made this documentary for HBO. So of course I watched it. I was very curious to see what they were going to say in this documentary, and I have a lot of thoughts about what the documentary said. First of all, I was really pleasantly surprised and really happy that the focus of the documentary was on, private citizen, nobodies, everyday citizens like me, whose were completely private figures, had no interest in being public figures, and then in a matter of mere moments, their lives were, became involuntary public figures. Their lives were destroyed before they even knew that their lives had been destroyed, and they've never fully recovered from what happened to them. They were basically dragged into the public spotlight against their wishes. A grossly distorted, grotesquely, not correct, false narrative about whatever that they had done or hadn't done, was being propagated around the world in mere seconds and mere minutes, and their life was destroyed before they even knew that this had happened to them. Just like what happened to me at Yale during the Living or Napping While Black hate crime hoax. My life was destroyed. A video about me that was being cast as something completely antithetical to what actually occurred was being propagated around the world, and my life was destroyed before I even knew that had happened, and I've never recovered from it. And so I was really pleasantly surprised to see that was the route that they took with this documentary, because something that I was not happy about was most of the talking heads that they chose for the documentary were awful. God awful. Just horrible. And they were just spouting complete nonsense, the same nonsense we've been hearing for forever, that from the people who are trying to pretend like they weren't trying to drive nobodies to suicide for moral outrage industry money in the fake news press and on social media. So I was one thing in particular I wanted to talk about was Matt Colvin. I was very well, all of the persons who, there are three main examples of cancel culture victims and trial by Twitter victims. And I'm forgetting the first two persons' name. I remember Matt Colvin's name. Matt Colvin was the guy whose life was destroyed because there was a New York Times piece done about him. He was the guy after the pandemic sort of really, took off in the US. He was the guy that was basically castigated, just like completely vilified in the fake news press and on social media because he had purchased like close to 18,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. And this is when everyone was freaking out and trying to buy hand sanitizer and trying to buy wet wipes and trying to buy toilet paper. And there were runs on pharmacies and grocery stores, etc. No one could get the hand sanitizer, and everybody was freaking out, and everybody was trying to stockpile, and there were shortages and all that. So that was the guy he was like an individual seller for Amazon, and this was something that he'd been doing for, I believe, a number of years, and he was fairly successful at it. He was supporting himself and his family by doing this, and he was the guy that was just completely vilified as demonic, as just evil, because he was price gouging and he had bought these 18,000 bottles of hand sanitizer, and now he was selling them at this allegedly at this grossly inflated price. So I was really moved by his story. So his life was completely decimated. He had to go into hiding. He bought a handgun for personal safety and to protect his family. And his life was completely devastated. And he actually, I guess, ended up, I believe that there were at some point some kind of criminal charges that were made against him, and he made some kind of settlement with the Attorney General, I believe, of Tennessee. I believe he lives in Chattanooga, or he did. I don't know if he still does. But anyway, so it was so moving to hear his side of the story, right? Like that he actually had been basically tricked by the New York Times, which I 100% believe. And I still need to do a video about how I was tricked to go on the canceled podcast with Rob Rosen and Desma Simon of Painless Productions. And they continue to exploit me and make moral outrage industry money from me. And what they did to me was horrific. I will do a separate video about that. I've been meaning to do a video about that. But I absolutely believe, knowing how the New York Times treated me and what the New York Times did to me, that the New York Times basically tricked Matt Colvin into being the subject of this article. And Matt Colvin talks about how he did it because he really wanted to sort of like speak up for the sellers, for the individual sellers. Like, no, we're really not price gouging that much. We really aren't, because we have to pay for shipping the product to whoever buys it. And of course, we're going to raise the price enough so that we can actually make a decent profit off of it. But he didn't feel like, that his prices were that inflated, especially compared to some other sellers. And then also he said that he chose to do the New York Times article because he wanted to stick up for sellers and he wanted to tell their side of the story. And I absolutely believe that. And I believe that the New York Times lied to him. I believe that the New York Times tricked him into doing the piece. And then he said how like they wanted him to look angry in the pictures that were taken. So he was shocked when he saw the way that he was portrayed in the article when it was published. And I feel so much for him. And his life was completely destroyed. He was, this caricature of him, this evil caricature of him was propagated around the world in moments, and they were doing it for, moral outrage and extreme profit, and they didn't care less if they got this poor guy killed. They didn't care if he committed suicide. They didn't care if someone murdered him. He had to go into hiding. He and his family had to go into hiding for his personal safety. And he recognizes that he recognizes that he did something, wrong, not to the degree to which it was portrayed, especially in this New York Times article. And then they showed a tweet of the jerk who wrote the New York Times article, bragging about how that was like the third most read New York Times article, or just article in general, of like 2020 or whenever it was that was published. Yeah, it would have been 2020. I can't remember exactly which month, but I just felt so much for this guy. And I was tweeting tonight about I've done videos about this before. I was tweeting tonight about something that my former advisor, Tom Tyler of Yale Law School, said at a Justice Collaboratory dinner, where he basically admitted that Yale admissions violates Title VI of the Federal Civil Rights Act, and he made statements about Black students and their preparedness for university that got those two Georgetown law lecturers, fired, right? And there was just a guy, Dorian Abbott, who's this really preeminent scientist that was going to give a talk on completely unrelated, on his work, on his scientific work, completely unrelated, at MIT, and MIT canceled his talk. And the reason why they canceled his talk is because he had written like an op-ed or whatever for Newsweek that, argued against, affirmative action and the current, diversity, equity, and inclusion tyranny that's happening on college campuses. And so, completely unrelated to his talk on science that he was going to give, I can't remember exactly what the subject of his talk was, but it had nothing to do with affirmative action or the opinions that he had stated in, I believe it was Newsweek that he wrote this op-ed for. So what I was saying is that so Tom Tyler, my former advisor, Professor Tom Tyler at Yale Law School, he said the exact same kinds of statements. He said the exact same kinds of statements at this Justice Collaboratory dinner in late April 2018. Okay? So is he going to get fired? And I'm not saying I want him to get fired. I don't want him to get fired. I don't think he should be fired for what he said about the preparedness of Black students for university. I don't think he should be fired for that. But what I'm saying is neither should have those two Georgetown law lecturers, and Dorian Abbott's talk at MIT should not have been canceled because he stated his opinion about affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion policies on university campuses. That is my point. And so what I said about Matt Colvin, whose life was destroyed in no small part by the New York Times, my life was destroyed in no small part, of course, by the New York Times. The New York Times defines fake news press. The New York Times lied to me, told disgusting lies about me. They knew I was innocent. They knew I was an innocent civil rights attorney. They knew they were putting my life in the gravest of danger. They didn't care. They didn't care. They only care about clickbait. They only care about making money, making moral outrage industry money. And so the New York Times, in response to the producers, the director, Monica Lewinsky of this HBO documentary on cancel culture, the New York Times responded and said, "We quoted Matt Colvin accurately and fairly." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You know exactly what you did. You know exactly what you did. You set out to destroy a nobody's life. And I already did a video about how we have to readdress the New York Times v. Sullivan, the Supreme Court ruling that basically allows the fake news press, including the New York Times right now, to just wantonly destroy the lives of nobodies for moral outrage industry money. They don't care if they get people killed. They don't care if they drive innocent private citizen nobodies to suicide. And they're abusing the definition of public figure. And as I addressed in that other video, this is why Sarah Palin's defamation suit against the New York Times is so important, even though she is definitively a public figure. But we have to readdress the definition of public figure because it is being so grossly abused by the fake news press, including the New York Times, so that they can just wantonly destroy the lives of private citizen nobodies for moral outrage industry money. And they're doing this with complete impunity at this point. There's no way to hold them accountable. And so what I said about in my tweet tonight about my advisor at Yale, former advisor at Yale Law School, Tom Tyler, I basically aped the quote from the New York Times about how they treated Matt Colvin when they said that they quoted him accurately and fairly. And I said, just like the New York Times said about Matt Colvin, even though they knew they were destroying that poor guy's life, I quoted my former advisor, Professor Tom Tyler at Yale Law School, accurately and fairly. I quoted him accurately and fairly. And actually, I did. I quoted him accurately and fairly, his statements. So what he said, I've done other videos about this, but what he said is he said that there are basically no black U.S. high school students who are prepared for any university, let alone Yale. This is why when you always see someone in the news that's a high school student who's been accepted to all of the Ivies, I think there are 8 of them, it's always a black student. And he said that the elite institutions like Yale, because there are basically no U.S. black high school students who are even nominally prepared for university, any university, elite institutions like Yale will do absolutely anything to enroll the few that are at least nominally prepared, and solely based on the color of their skin, which is of course a gross violation of Title VI of the Federal Civil Rights Act. So that's what he said. I quoted him accurately and fairly. And those kinds of statements got those 2 Georgetown law lecturers fired. And those kinds of statements made MIT cancel the talk of Dorian Abbott. I'm just saying. So anyway, so that was the part that was about Matt Colvin. I don't want this video to get too long. I will make more videos about this. But the other 2 people that they addressed was a gentleman, Latino, and that's pertinent because he actually, when he was being fired by his employer, his employer was like a gas and electric company, a public utility, I believe in Southern California. Was he living in San Diego or Los Angeles? I think San Diego, I can't remember exactly. But he was the guy that someone spread across social media that he was making the OK, which is allegedly a white supremacist hand signal now, I guess. I know that that's in dispute as well, whether that's actually the case or if that was just like some hoax perpetrated by someone on 4chan or 8chan or whatever. But anyway, so he was the guy who allegedly had his hand out his truck window and made the OK white supremacist signal in front of a Black Lives Matter protest. And then someone took video of him or a picture of him and then plastered it all over social media. And then for some reason it went viral and got picked up by the fake news press. And then his employer, which I would believe was a public utility, fired him. And he's a Latino guy, and he was basically just like fidgeting. And he says in the documentary he didn't even understand what cancel culture was until he had been canceled and someone explained to him that he had been canceled and he was a cancel culture victim. And then the other person, and I was really happy that they focused on private citizen nobodies, it was the woman, and I don't remember her name, but it was the woman. She was an employee of Rockwell something or other. It was some sort of like, she basically promoted cancer research. Anyway, I can't remember exactly. I remember that the name of her company from which she got fired was called Rockwell something, and she worked like she was someone who did basically like PR for fundraising or PR or something like that for cancer research. So, she's doing this really good thing, and that's her job, and she's passionate about it, and she's a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, but she's, and she's very sort of, progressive, and she made basically like a bad joke on social media. It was on Facebook, and kind of not didn't exactly, but kind of said like, or it was portrayed as her saying that she hopes Trump supporters, get sick and die from COVID or whatever. That wasn't exactly what she said. But she was being flippant, and I think she was in kind of an argument with someone, and then someone um, took that what she had put on Facebook, her post, and then sent it to some guy, I guess name what's his name, Mike Cupertino, was that right? I can't remember. Mike Cupertino, I think, who was like a minor public figure that then became part of the Trump White House, and he basically just like ran with it, and then it got to all over went to the Hill, and it was basically like she was this like representative of this organization that does cancer research or whatever, and that she was someone who was, it was like she was saying that she was this evil person because she said that she hoped that Trump supporters would get sick and die from COVID. And that's not even, it was just her life was destroyed in moments, in mere moments. And she actually apologized. She issued an apology immediately. Um, but it just snowballed. And she talked about how, she said she went to a very dark place, which I think she was talking about suicidal ideation, because in mere moments, literally in mere moments, she was fired. Her life was completely decimated. She, at the end of the documentary, they said that she was able eventually to find another job, and she was married and had, an employed partner. So she wasn't in I hope such a precarious situation. Although nowadays you have two income families, but they still can just barely make ends meet. Especially if you have kids, and then that poor guy that was the employee of like the gas and electric company. It said at the end of the documentary that he still hadn't found employment. Um, and then for Matt Colvin, I think he's still in dire straits too. And of course, I'm still in financial dire straits and could not get a job, cannot get a job in academia or as an attorney. Was struggling for months to find a job, and only recently secured a low paying temp job that's just like barely keeping me off the streets. I love this job. I love it. I help keep people off the streets, but it's just barely keeping me off the streets. I'm not okay. And that's what I really liked about this documentary, is that they talked so much about how this devastates the lives. J.K. Rowling can't really be canceled, but even if you want to say that she was canceled, J.K. Rowling's going to be okay, right? J.K. Rowling's going to be okay. I'm not going to be okay. I'm not going to be okay. Matt Colvin's not going to be okay. And he has a wife and kids. He has a family to take care of and provide for. He's not going to be okay. He's banned now from his job, which was selling on Amazon. He was banned from Amazon. And, the guy that was the employee of the electric and gas company, he's not okay. He's not okay. And the woman who was fired from Rockwell, whatever it was called, thank goodness she did find another job eventually. I'm really happy to hear that. I'm very happy that she found another job. But this was a horrifying, hellish nightmare that she had to go through, And so I was really happy that this documentary focused on the private citizen nobodies whose lives are being wantonly destroyed via cancel culture and trial by Twitter. And I'm really happy that they addressed Matt Colvin, because this is not just the result of social media moral outrage mobs on Twitter and Facebook, etc. The fake news press is leading. The fake news press is leading the moral outrage industry, because they pretend that what happens on social media, they pretend that when a Twitter race hustler like Sean Kane posts a video on social media, they pretend that that's actual, credible, legitimate, actual news. It's not. Okay? The fake news press, including the New York Times, and Newsweek did this. When someone posts a TikTok video of their little old white lady busybody neighbor who comes over and complains about her neighbor's Tigger flag, Newsweek pretended like this is actual news. It's not. It's fake news. Okay? So the fake news press, including the mainstream press, CNN, MSNBC, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, NPR, PBS, everyone, they all pretend like when a Twitter race hustler like Sean Kane posts a Karen Gone Wild video, that's legitimate, actual news. What happened at Yale was a non-event. It not only was a non-crime, it was a non-event. And they blew it up into a global racial hysteria, okay? And they keep trying to do it. And now I'm really pushing back hard. I think I played a part in keeping the Tigger flag Karen off of a lot of the, mainstream news media outlets. I think that I played a role in that. And I've really been trying now to get ahead of some of these Living While Black race hoaxes in particular, and stop them and stop the fake news press like the New York Times from exploiting them and blowing them up into global racial hysterias for moral outrage industry money, okay? This is why we have to readdress New York Times v. Sullivan. Okay, this video, I don't want it to get too long. I will make more videos. There's only one quick thing that I want to say, and I'm definitely going to make more videos about this, and then I'm going to wrap this up for tonight. The talking heads that they got for this HBO documentary were horrible, evil, vile. Okay, Kara Swisher, who writes for the New York Times in particular, she disgusts me. What she said in this HBO documentary about cancel culture and trial by Twitter disgusted me. So she tried to say that cancel culture is just the marginalized acting collectively on social media to hold powerful people accountable for their bigotry. Yeah, of course she would say that because she's trying to protect the New York Times. She knows perfectly well that most of cancel culture is just like what the New York Times did to me. Help the Yale administration perpetrate a Living While Black hate crime hoax and try to drive me to suicide and destroy my lifelong human and civil rights career for moral outrage industry money. That's what the New York Times did. So no, Kara Swisher, you're wrong. Everything you said on that HBO documentary is stupid and wrong and evil. You know that most of cancel culture is the New York Times wantonly destroying the lives of private nobodies for moral outrage industry money. You know that. And we all know you know that. And you're a liar. You're an evil, lying bigot and fraud. Okay, and then the same thing for Roxane Gay. I will do a whole separate video about what Roxane Gay did to me. So Roxane Gay is an evil, lying bigot and fraud, and she was a talking head on this documentary for HBO on cancel culture and trial by Twitter. And so she started off by saying she doesn't call it cancel culture, she calls it consequences culture. So then if it's consequences culture, Roxane Gay, when are you going to face accountability? When are you going to face consequences for what you did to me? You're the racist troll. You're the racist troll. Okay? You're the racist troll who is trying to bring what happens on social media into the real world with real world effects i.e. the devastation of my life, and me almost committing suicide. You did that, destroying my lifelong human and civil rights career. And 100%, Roxane Gay always knew I was an innocent civil rights attorney and Yale graduate student. She knows my advisor at Yale, Jason Stanley. She was rewarded by Yale President Peter Salovey with a visiting professorship for helping him try to get me killed. I will do a whole other video about this. The other thing that she said that was so incredibly evil and stupid and wrong and bigoted, she's a fraud, she's a liar, and the whole world knows it now. The whole world sees her for what she is. She compared the trial by Twitter without due process, which is the extrajudicial mob vigilante injustice. I call it the woke KKK. She compared this to our U.S. legal system with its due process and constitutional fair trial protections. She said, of course, there's going to be innocent people who are destroyed by cancel culture and trial by Twitter, but there are innocent people who are destroyed by the judicial system in the U.S. Okay, the judicial system in the U.S. has due process and is bound by the Constitution. And that doesn't mean it's perfect, but there are constraints. Okay? Unlike the woke KKK, which is what you are and what you did to me when you subjected me to trial by Twitter without due process. That's extrajudicial mob vigilante injustice. It's the woke KKK. That's what cancel culture is. And that's what she did to me. That's what Roxane Gay did to me. She's a liar. She's evil. She's a bigot. She's a fraud. I will do another video just about Roxane Gay. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up because I don't want this video to be too long. I also want to talk about Tristan Harris. He was in the HBO documentary. I've talked about him before on Twitter. I really didn't know who he was or what his deal was until I saw him on Bill Maher the other week, and I was really impressed what he had to say. I mean, what he said on the HBO documentary was good. It was right. So I'll do a video about him and my thoughts on his project of trying to make, stop social media basically from destroying us, which it is. I agree with his sort of thesis. Okay, I will have all of my fundraising links below. I love you all so much. I'll do more videos on this. I just don't want this video to get too long. It's already over a half hour. I have more thoughts on this HBO documentary, on Kara Swisher, on Tristan Harris, on Roxane Gay. Overall, though, I was happy overall with the documentary, and I was mostly happy with it because it focused on the devastation to the lives of private citizen nobodies, and they don't recover. I haven't recovered. I almost died. I haven't recovered. And that this is such a reckless waste of people who are really, everyone is really contributing, to society. I have so much to contribute to society, and now I can't get a job in my chosen fields that I've spent years and years preparing for, working on, my Saving the World project, my Yale PhD dissertation that I've been working on for more than a decade. And so it's not just a loss to me, it's not just about whether or not I live or die or my life has been devastated. It's a loss to the society. It's a loss to the world, I have so much to offer, just like these other individuals had so much to offer, and their lives were just recklessly and wantonly devastated. By the fake news press and the moral outrage industry via cancel culture and trial by Twitter. And when you're not J.K. Rowling, you don't recover. You don't recover. And people are dying. People are dying. It's not just that innocent lives of nobodies are being destroyed. People are committing suicide, and the suicides are really starting to stack up. All right. I'll have all of my fundraising links below. GoFundMe, PayPal me. Direct link to my wonderful attorneys at Randazza Legal Group. They just filed my appeal for the Yale Police body cam. I'll do another video about that. I love you all so much. Thank you all so much for all of your kind words and support. You guys, I just love you. You keep saving my life. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.